Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our EPI Business Development Webinar Series. My name is Scott Snyder, and I am the Vice President here at the Exit Planning Institute. Again, welcome to our presentation today called Triggering Owner Action. Before we dive in to the content of the webinar, let's take care of some quick logistics. First, the webinar is recorded and can be distributed to the attendees, so if you need to go back and want to listen to something, feel free to do so. During that, when you receive that recording. If somebody would like the presentation, I ask that you please email me directly, and I will gladly send you a PDF copy of this particular presentation as well. Questions, I always welcome questions kind of throughout the presentation. I'll try to monitor the question box, so if you have a question, you should on your go-to webinar screen there have a place to place those questions. So please submit them through the questions box, and I'll address them as they kind of come up throughout the presentation. If not, we'll certainly look at them. I'll pull it up and look at all of them at the end of the presentation. So today we're going to talk about triggering owner action. So what are the activities or the items or the techniques that we as advisors can take to trigger action of the business owner to have them basically actively participate and actively plan for the transition of their company, This is a presentation that we do a lot at our chapter level. In fact, literally just last evening, I just got home from presenting at the Wisconsin chapter, where I actually presented in the Madison location. What uniquely they have going on up in the Wisconsin chapter, Martha Sullivan, Bill Otto, and Scott Miller, our primary chapter leaders up there, have built a model that they do virtual education. So although I was live and in person in the Madison area, broadcasting from the Madison, Wisconsin area, we broadcasted actually that webinar out to the Milwaukee group as well. So we're able to cover two major cities in Wisconsin. Both heard this presentation just yesterday morning. The week before that, I was actually with our group in the greater Nashville area presenting at the chapter there. One of the reasons we use this as a really good chapter presentation, especially either at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year, is because we'll talk about, and we'll end our presentation here today with a couple of kind of mini case studies. It really showcased really a showcasing of the collaborative efforts that people can make in their local communities to trigger owner action, not just as individual advisors, but as groups that particularly operate at our chapter level. So thanks for joining us here today. A little bit about my background is I did notice there are several folks and several names that I didn't necessarily recognize. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about why I'm passionate about what I do. So I actually wear, one of the hats that I wear is a hat of an exited owner. So in 2010, April of 2010, I sold a business, and so when you think about kind of my personality, or perhaps how I kind of identify myself professionally, I really identify first as a business owner and entrepreneur. And in 2010, I sold a company which teamed me up. I also identify as a family business owner. Teamed me up with my father, Chris Snyder, who many of you may know, our president and CEO here at the Exit Planning Institute, and the creator of the Value Acceleration methodology. At the time, he was a advisor. Had a value growth and exit planning practice where he was a CPA. Before we were owners of EPI, we were CPAs. So him and his business partner at the time, Andy Kuhar, created a company called Aspire Management. And in 2011, after a little bit of an earn-out and transition from my company, I joined Chris and Andy at Aspire Management to help them build that company here in Northeast Ohio, here in Cleveland. Now you fast forward, and kind of concurrently along those years, Chris and I created a family company called Snyder Premier Growth. That company now owns EPI and about 7 other different entities. And during that time frame, fast forward to 2014, I came over to EPI to really do what I do here today, act as the company's vice president. So I primarily work with all of you and all of our clients and partners across the United States. I travel about 200 or 230 days out of the year, visiting with all of you and visiting our programs, so on and so forth. I implement our growth strategy here at EPI, and I run all of our company's operations. And so a couple reasons about why I'm passionate about the position that I sit in and have sat in here since kind of July of 2014. Well, one, with now almost 800 certified exit planning advisors in the EPI community, I get to take what I learned at Aspire Management and what made Aspire Management so successful in 2011, 12, and 13, and take those same types of growth strategies and help our certified exit planning advisors achieve their dreams as well of growing their value, growing their exit planning practices, or very simply triggering owner action or growing their owner engagement and client entanglement. And so I take what we've done in 2000, really, 11, when I came on board at Aspire Management, take those experiences and now get to work with a bunch of folks across the United States and across the globe implementing those same strategies, which will in effect change owner outcomes. Number two, I'm a millennial. And so although I think our immediate marketplace is certainly the baby boomer generation, I believe that our challenge as advisors is frankly yet to come. So as we actively work with our baby boomer business owners, of which we're seeing from the State of Owner Readiness Survey, 67% of those owners are indicating that they want to transition over the next 5 years. We are also educating the generations to come, perhaps even those generations that will buy those companies, and showing them that exit planning is something that we focus on right now and is merely just good business strategy, a way in which we should always be operating our business. And so if you ask Chris or I, perhaps certainly Chris, if you ask what his big, fat, audacious goal, what one of his legacies, lasting legacies, a stamp that he'd like to make on the exit planning marketplace, owner or advisor, I think he'd say that he'd like to see the value acceleration methodology and the concepts within it being taught in business schools around the country. I was laughing with the group in Wisconsin yesterday, or I believe it was frankly Monday night at dinner, because I teach at our local high school's entrepreneurship program. We have an entrepreneurship and innovation center, and I teach there. And when these high school kids are building these companies, the exit strategy component of that business plan that they write is about 3 to 5. I literally think it says exit strategy. Please create your exit strategy in 3 to 5 sentences. And we all might chuckle and laugh as advisors because we know that it's much, much more than that. Certainly the CEPAs on the call understand that. And so I think, probably the second reason I'm passionate about what I do is that I believe that we can continue to show younger entrepreneurs in their 40s or in their 30s or perhaps in their 20s that they should always be preparing for their exit, because it drives positive outcomes and drives value in their own businesses and in their own lives today. I've started to really launch all my presentations that I do with this quote from Oprah, and you start to see it in a lot of exit planning presentations that EPI conducts. I like the quote because not only do I 100% agree with it, but I think it really hits home for us as the advisors, and certainly something I would challenge all of you when you're in your early meetings in 2018 to bring to your owner clients. Oprah believes this. She said, "I believe luck is preparation meeting opportunity. If you hadn't been so prepared when the opportunity came along, you might have not have been so lucky." And so I challenge you as the advisor first, is that I guarantee you are a trusted advisor, probably the most trusted advisor to at least one business owner. And when they start to execute one of the biggest events of their professional and personal lives, the transition of their company, and they call you because you've been advising them as their accounting advisor or their legal advisor or their wealth advisor for many, many years, perhaps several different generations you've been in their family. And they call you because you're that trusted advisor, and they say, "You know what, Scott, I'm ready to start to execute my transition. I think it's time that we start thinking about this. Can you help me?" Are you going to be prepared when that phone call comes? Or are you going to hope that you're lucky that you have the education, the tools, the solutions needed, and the network needed to help that owner execute that? Or are you just going to be lucky? I challenge you to then go out and challenge your owners that when a tragedy happens, one of the 5 Ds, death, divorce, disability, dispute, or maybe when a positive unexpected event happens, when a private equity company calls you up, or a strategic buyer. Back in September of 2009, a competitor called me and said, "Scott, have you ever thought about selling your business?" Luckily, I had a certified exit planning advisor father that knew a thing or two about the M&A process and exit planning. But are your business owner clients, when a significant opportunity like that comes along, or a tragedy happens, are you going to hope that your business owner client is lucky? Or are you going to help that they're ready and prepared when that opportunity comes? Today, like I said, we're going to talk about triggering owner action, and this is kind of what we're talking about. There's really two things that we'll talk about next that are needed to trigger owner action. However, they're both rooted in education. And so, we talk a lot about education because I think it's very much different than the professional advisory services that we might sell today: valuation, accounting, legal, wealth or financial wealth management, investment strategies, financial planning, insurances, so on and so forth. Is that the fact of the matter is there's 660,000 CPAs in the United States today. AICPA, they're kind of largely considered their big organization, right? Has about 400,000 members and was founded in, I think, 1897. If you looked at the certified financial planner crowd, there's about 75,000 of those folks. And the CFP board was founded in something like 1985. I mention those statistics because it's likely that a business owner understands at least in part what you do and what kind of value that you bring them. They understand what a financial plan is. They understand what life insurance is. They understand what audited financials are. They understand a tax return. They understand a valuation. They might even understand some legal issues. They might understand some investment strategies. But when you come to them and you tell them that I'm here to help you prepare for your exit, or that I'm a certified exit planning advisor, it's likely that they don't know the value that you bring, let alone who you are. 2 weeks ago, I said I was in Nashville. I was touring our location for the Exit Planning Summit this year of September 24th or September 23rd, 24th, and 25th, that kind of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in Nashville, Tennessee. And we were at the Hilton downtown there, and I was coming out to look at that facility, start to plan our event. And I spent about an hour and a half with our event coordinator there as I got to know her. She got to know our style, and we're finally sitting down for a cup of coffee, going through some kind of loose ends and firming some schedules up. And she sat back and she said, "Scott, you seem like a pretty open guy, and we've all been taking bets in the office. No one has looked you up your website yet. But we've been taking events. We're taking bets in the office," and she said, we had to laugh because they dared me to ask you, "What is the Exit Planning Institute? Are you guys funeral directors?" We had a good laugh about that, and maybe some of you will as well on the other side of this webinar. But no, we're not funeral directors. We actually help owners build value in their businesses and prepare for their exit, their transition of their company. And so my fact of the matter is that likely people don't know what our capabilities are, or that the value that they bring. If you took EPI and maybe our two other competitors out in this marketplace here in the United States, and you said how many advisors are certified in exit planning by these three organizations, we'd probably only swell up to about 2,000 advisors. And so education is key component in order to trigger that owner action. And if you're able to do that, it'll result in a better engagement for you. You will venture into not only a great experience and engagement with your client, but you'll venture into something that I call client entanglement. You'll be very entangled into that client's life and business. It'll result in, very simply, better results, which will eventually change owner outcomes. The necessary tools that we need are really two things. Number one, we need a proven practical process, something that is easy enough for the owner to understand that owner finds value in, a roadmap to an eventual exit that drives value today and plans for contingencies, and something that really showcases that whole event that will happen over perhaps many, many years. Number two, we as advisors have to become an educator. So even though if we're armed with this great methodology or process, if we can't spend the time educating our business owners on what it really means to prepare for their exit, and frankly educating them along the way about the different aspects inside of that exit planning ecosystem that will happen, we actually won't trigger owner action. On the flip side, if we're a great educator and we spend all the time in the world, but we're only teaching our client concepts, not an actual executionable kind of process, an executable process, then we're also not going to trigger owner action. So let's investigate this. First, this is how Exit Planning Institute defines exit planning. Exit planning combines the plan, concept, effort, and process into a clear, simple strategy to build a business that is transferable through strong human, structural, customer, and social capital. The future of you, your family, and your business are addressed by exit planning through creating value today. So a few key things that I'd like you all to pick up. The bold words as we start this definition is that exit planning is not just a plan. Exit planning is not just some concepts. Exit planning it combines everything into a process that we can execute in a simple strategy. It focuses on building value that's transferable, and it focuses on today, not the 6 or 12 or 18 months before you sell your company. It focuses on the 10 years before you sell your company, the 5 years or the 2 years before you sell your company. It focuses on today. This is that practical process that we're talking about. The CEPAs on our webinar here today are trained inside of this methodology. We call it the value acceleration process. A high level, you can see it's really developed with two people in mind. One, the business owner. We wanted to develop this when we started to develop this back in 2012. We actually put it into the CEPA program in November of 2013, and it became the way that we do business as certified exit planning advisors inside of the EPI community in really 2014. But in development phase, we said, look, two people in mind. Number one, the business owner themselves. They don't want complicated. As a business owner myself, I don't like complicated at all. My life is already complicated and chaotic running a business. So I don't want something even more complicated and something that I can't understand. I want something that's simple. I want something that's proven. I want something that has clear metrics and deliverables, a clear roadmap. Number two, it was developed with people like you, all of you on this call here today, the advisor in mind. We wanted to arm you with a practical process that you could take an owner through, not just some concepts that you try or not just a plan that you deliver, something that it gets them working on their exit every day they enter their office, right? That aligns the team, that brings everything together, that brings the philosophies and the process all in one, right? So high level, it has 3 gates: discover, prepare, and decide. I'd like to work backwards. So if you join me down at the decide phase, we're saying that when the owner comes to you, likely they're saying, I'd like to transition or sell my company. You punt that down the road a little bit and you said, look, you're going to be much more educated if I can get through the first 2 gates. Now, jumping back to discover. Everything starts with what we call the triggering event. It's called the triggering event because it triggers all the owner action, right? It's used as an intriguing and empowerment tool, something we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. It's a combination of a kind of a range of value business valuation and what we call an EVA, an enterprise value assessment. We're measuring not just the financial value of the business, if you will, but we're also going to score and value those intangible value factors of that business. Out of that, we create what's called the prioritized action plan, and then we thrust ourselves into prepare. This is where most of the activities are going to happen. We take what we call the alignment of the 3 legs of the stool. In order to have a successful exit, you have to have equal effort put into planning for your business, planning personally and planning financially. We combine the personal and financial in one area called values, and we concentrate on business improvements called de-risking, 2 concurrent paths that will follow. We work within these things every 90 days, picking 5 business and 5 personal things that the owner or the owner's teams or the owner's advisors will work on their behalf. Every 90 days, so jumping now into decide, right? This isn't something that you ask 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road. It's something that this question of grow or exit inside of the decide gate is revisited every single 90 days, saying to the owner, are we ready to keep doing this, kind of growing our business, de-risking our business, or are we ready to kind of take the business to market? So every 90 days we'll revisit this, and then we'll jump back to the start of prepare, picking another 5 business and 5 personal things to work on, thus driving value and de-risking our business and preparing for us personally. At a high level, that's the value acceleration methodology in a nutshell. It's rooted in some key philosophies. One, the master plan, which is the concept that Peter Chrisman, the founder of EPI, came up with, the alignment of the 3 legs of the stool: business, personal, and financial. Also rooted in what we call the 5 stages of value maturity. Also rooted in the 5 capitals. And then lastly, rooted in relentless execution, right? None of this is possible. It's a great idea, but if we can't execute, none of it's possible, right? So at a high level, that's the value acceleration methodology. An advisor armed with this methodology will begin to start triggering this owner action, right? So let's look at some high-level facts about the value acceleration methodology. One, it provides a clear roadmap to success for that business owner, right? It integrates those 3 legs of the stool, provides clear deliverables and metrics. It provides time to plan, right? So time to plan for contingencies, time to plan for taxes, estate planning, management succession, and value growth. If you have time to plan, you have time to look at more options. There's probably several of you on this call here today that have had clients that have come to you and said, I know for a fact I want to transition to my son or daughter. You sitting on the other side of that table are probably saying, I know for a fact that's a horrible idea, because you'll get more bang for your buck by selling to a third party. And frankly, I know that your son and daughter really don't want this business. It's a forced intergenerational transition, right? There's certainly those that exist. So by providing and actively planning, it provides us time to understand our strategic options for growth and exit. And last but certainly not least, it integrates critical team members. Not only the team of advisors that will help build this company for transition, but the team of managers and employees that work with the owner, right? Both teams. We're managing both teams. First and foremost, if you take anything out of the Eval acceleration methodology, it brings exit into the now. It's not something that you do when it's quote unquote time to exit. It's something that you do every single day. The bottom line, folks, as an owner myself, I do things in my business every single day that will eventually affect my exit, right? So it gives us more time to consider what we want to do post transition. What are we doing in the third act of our life? Helps us plan for those unplanned events. And being prepared means more options, right? For us as advisors, there's several different opportunities that exist. This was really not showing, obviously these are billing opportunities for the advisory crowd here on our call today, but it's really meant to showcase the different advisors that kind of play inside of the exit planning ecosystem. It really takes a team of advisors to make this thing go, anywhere from the traditional business valuation or value enhancement, project management, financial planning, or audit that we might have, all the way down to the functional specialties. Maybe we have an HR issue. Maybe we could build on our marketing. Maybe we could improve our management training or our IT, our systems and technology. So this is really meant to show you that there's all kinds of advisors, from kind of these core and traditional advisors all the way to these maybe untraditional type advisors as well. So now that we've kind of armed ourselves with that practical process, and we kind of understand how it kind of works very high level, now we have to change ourselves a little bit. We have to become more of an educator. We alluded to this, or I talked about this a little bit when we started talking about our marketplace and why it's so important that we educate. If anybody's read the book Blue Ocean Strategy, you'll understand what I'm talking about. If you haven't, the book Blue Ocean Strategy talks about the difference between a red ocean and a blue ocean. Well, folks, the exit planning marketplace is absolutely a blue ocean. It's really an untapped marketplace. There's only really 2,000 people actively doing it, right? There's a lot of people that probably say they do it, but I challenge them to say, what process do you use? What advisors do you use? How do you educate the owner, right? So it's relatively an untapped marketplace. There's a lot of opportunity for growth. It's an expansion of existing industries, right? And it's an expansion of the M&A industry. It's the expansion of the value enhancement industry. It's the expansion of the wealth management industry, so on and so forth. And competition is irrelevant. I think this is actually key. I always like to say that exit planning is more of a community than it's a competition. I know in my hometown there's a gas station on four corners of if you go down to, back to Strongsville, Ohio, on the corner of Prospect Road and Route 82, there's literally 4 gas stations on that corner. I always say that exit planning is like fuel for your cars, is that those 4 gas stations can all kind of exist on the same intersection because everybody needs fuel to go. Just like there's 4.5 million business owners transitioning over the next 5 to 10 years, there's not one single firm or one single advisor that can actually help all of those owners transition. Now everybody has their kind of competitive makeup, right? If I want kind of a meal to go and kind of a cool experience, I might pop by a Sheetz. If I want the little guy that pops on and shows me the news for the quick 5 minutes that makes me fuel my car, I might go to the Exxon or the BP. Or if I want something kind of quick and dirty where I can get a handful of points for the candy bar and coffee that I bought, I'd probably go to a Speedway, right? So everybody kind of has their competitive edge, but at the end of the day, they're all selling fuel for $2.22 a gallon, right? It's kind of like exit planning. As compared to a red ocean is very crowded. There's a lot of competition, and although you might need a lot of expertise to deliver your service isn't very unique, and it's not necessarily unknown, right? Life insurance, valuations, right? People know what that is, whether it be owner or advisor. They pretty much understand it, right? So that's the difference between red ocean and blue ocean. Before we can understand kind of the behavioral changes, if you will, that we need to make, we need to understand how we're delivering our message. This is one of my favorite slides, I think, that kind of talks about our generations. So as we kicked off, we talk a lot about baby boomers, right? That's certainly our most immediate marketplace. So when looking at this diagram, I'd like you to focus there in the yellow and really focus on really the two things in the red, which I consider to probably be the most important. Now, for all the baby boomers on the webinar with us here today, thank you very much. You guys all invented the 60-hour work week, right? You also have a core value of success. So let's back up and talk about the work week thing. For a baby boomer, what this means to me as an exit planner, I don't necessarily believe it's 60 hours of work each week. What I think their work ethic really means, I want to be active. And so I always talk about a client of Aspire Management's back in the day called Craig and Meg. Their names were Craig and Meg. They own a manufacturing company here in Cleveland, Ohio on the east side, about a $40 million manufacturing company. They came to our office, and me, Andy, and Chris sat down with them, and they talked about how they wanted to transition their company. They were ready. That they had owned this company for almost 45 years, and it was time to retire. And we said, well, what kind of vision do you have? What are you guys into outside of work? A couple of things. Craig, I always liked going to meet with Craig because he had literally an airplane hangar full of cars. He was an avid car collector, literally an airplane. There's hundreds of cars in this thing. On the flip side, his wife worked part-time in the business with him, but most of her time was spent outside of the business doing a lot of charitable work, not just with her money, but with her time, right? Very passionate about the Northeast Ohio and the benefiting and growing the Northeast Ohio community. Very passionate about that, born and raised here. So going back to Craig, we asked him, Craig, what are you thinking you're going to do? And he said, well, we have it all laid out, Scott. We're going to move to Denver, Colorado, get a house up in the mountains, and we're going to fish and hike and relax in the summer, and we're going to ski and do the ski resort thing in the wintertime. And Meg was like, yes, I can't wait to do this kind of thing. It's just going to be Craig and I. And I said, well, that's interesting. Knowing that you're an entrepreneur, and for the past 45 years, Craig, how many hours have you put into the office? And he goes, man, I don't know, anywhere between probably 60, upwards of 80 hours a week growing this company, especially back, for the first 10 years. We really spent a lot of time building. Me and my team really spent a time building this thing. It's like, I just put in about 68 hours last week. I look over at Meg, and I said, what are you during that time? She's like, well, I hang out with our kids. I work in the business a little bit, doing helping Craig out, and then I do a lot of charity work. I'm very, very passionate about volunteering and making a difference. And we said, well, both of those things are now going to go away, and now you two, who have not spent that kind of time together in 45 years, are going to spend every single hour together for the rest of your lives, pretty much. And Meg kind of raises her eyebrows and looks over at Craig, who's sipping a cup of coffee, and says, I've never thought about it like that. We asked Meg, Meg, why do you do what you do inside of the Northeast Ohio community? And she said, well, there's economic development or the betterment of children. I believe in a strong Cleveland, Ohio, and I believe in investing time in this kind of hometown that I've grown up in. And I said, well, is that going to kind of transition over to the community of Greater Denver? What do you know about Denver? You visited there a couple times. Are you going to have that same passion for that city? Well, fast forward, we ended up selling their company for give or take about $35 million, and this is what they did. So they did go out and buy that house in Denver, Colorado, but they did it as kind of a summer or winter getaway. They maintained their residence here in Northeast Ohio, and what Craig did with a portion of his proceeds from that sale of his manufacturing company, he bought an auto wash and car detailing center over in Bedford Heights, Ohio. And so when you literally, you would never know, it's the typical story of the millionaire next door. When you go through his fancy auto wash, Craig is literally the guy there with the towels and shorts and a t-shirt in the summertime, buffing out and wiping down your car. Little do you know that guy probably has $30 million, right? Meg, on the other hand, continued to be very passionate about her charities, and in fact started one of her own. And so they continue to maintain that residence here in the Northeast Ohio area. They also bought a house down in the Carolinas, so they go, They go to the Carolinas, they go out to Denver, but they also kind of maintain kind of some of their hobbies here in Northeast Ohio. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but that is some serious sirens going on outside our EPI office here today. Regardless, so going back to the work ethic thing, bottom line is that Craig and Meg, they weren't passionate about working 60 hours a week, but they were passionate about staying very active about what they were passionate about. So definitely work ethic and lesson number one when working with baby boomers. Number two, they were very much tied to being successful. If you look at the Gen Xers, perhaps the people in their 40s, they really value their time. If you go to the left and you look at the kind of traditionalists, they really value their family and their community. This is probably why they had so many kids that created the baby boomer generation. I know my grandparents, who are traditionalists, they have about seven different children. Their friends had maybe 10 kids or a dozen kids, right? And so they very much valued their community and their family. They were always home at 5 o'clock for dinner, right? So when working with these baby boomers, or frankly working with the Gen Xers and millennials, we have to understand the different values or the different work ethics, the different attributes of the different generations that we will work with when we talk about exit planning. So let's start to talk about how can we really get to the owner and start to trigger this action. There's probably, if we're sitting in a room like I was yesterday in Madison, Wisconsin, there were several people that raised their hands when I asked the question, or I said this statement: owners are disinterested in exit planning. I could tell you that here at the Exit Planning Institute, we've had actually people have us want to change our name. We talk about building value, right? So we talk about, can't you be the Value Acceleration Institute? And so because we say that owners are disinterested in exit planning, that's a bad word. Don't use that word. Owners don't want to talk about their exit. Then it doesn't work for me. So I'm here to tell you that that is in fact very much false, and here's why. This graph is taken out of our State of Owner Readiness Survey. If you sat on a webinar that I had, I think it was to conclude last week, I had kind of a State of the Institute address, and we talked about our kind of findings, not only from the National State of Owner Readiness Survey, but from the micro-market surveys that we're conducting as well. This is one of the statements. So this was range. In this particular one we took, we see that 99% of owners actually agreed with this statement. This ranges, though, what I talked about last week on the State of the Institute address. I talked about what we're seeing is that anywhere between 80 and 99% of owners actually agree with this statement. The statement says, having a transition strategy is important for my future, and the future of my business. So for the exit strategy, the transition strategy, important to me personally and financially, and the future of my business. If you look at this particular example, 61%, the majority of this, strongly agree with this statement. And if you look at the agree and somewhat agree, you'll find that 99% of owners agree with this statement. So in fact, they're not disinterested in talking about exit planning or succession planning or transition strategy. They actually think it's extremely important. However, if you look at some of the other questions that we asked these same business owners in the State of Owner Readiness Survey, it came out like this. Almost 80% of the owners have no written plan at all, no written plan for transition. Almost 50% have done no planning at all. So definitely it's not written, it's just not there. 94%, almost 100% of this sample had done no planning for the next act of their life. And if you're selling your business at 55 or 60 or even 70, you have some good years left. What are you going to do? So almost 94% have no personal third act plan. 48% have done no planning at all, and almost 80% have no written transition plan. So the first question is why? On the left side of the equation here, in the kind of the pie chart, if you will, we're saying that owners actually very strongly believe in having a transition strategy. Yet on the other side, no one's doing anything about it. And so most would say that's because they're disinterested in exit planning, but that's not actually very true. So bear with me. Some of you may have heard this. This is called my tomato plant story. The company that I sold back in 2010 was a 13-person landscape management company, where we did, kind of high-image oriented properties, Marriott hotels, high-end apartment or condo villages, so on and so forth. I actually went to Ohio State's Agricultural Technical Institute down in Worcester, Ohio, to major in horticulture with a concentration on landscape design and construction. Believe that or not. If you came over my home, you would enter my home, and I have some of my old blueprints and construction layouts hanging in frames, my landscape room. I still maintain that I believe that I'm a pretty avid horticulturalist, if you will, probably more of a gardener. Regardless, I'm also a big bucket list holder. So I have about 120 item bucket list. One of those items was to kind of build and maintain a family garden. So about 3 years ago, and kind of envision this with me, bear with me and envision this. I built this big plot, right? It's probably about 40 feet by 20 feet, where me, my sister, my uncles, and everybody kind of comes in and has like a little of their own plot inside of this big garden that we built in my backyard. And so one of the best things, if you look around it, I guess, I have some woods in the back, and I have lattice fencing that goes about 8 feet tall. Pretty big, right? Pretty tall. I have that because of the deer. But one of the best things that grow in that garden, probably the best thing that grows in that garden, are tomato plants. And they literally grow as tall as that lattice fencing. They're massive. They're huge. And they produce literally hundreds of tomatoes, so much that if you came to the EPI office, these folks here like tomatoes, it's likely that they have a bag sitting on their desk in season of tomatoes from my garden. We can't even manage them all. So in this particular scenario, now that you have this kind of vision in your mind, I want you to also envision that the tomato plant itself is the business owner's business. The tomato plant is the business. The fruit, the tomato itself, the one that you pull and eat, is the owner's wealth. So the plant is the business and the tomato is the wealth. So when I go out and grow these tomato plants, if you're thinking about where we live in Northeast Ohio, we can't really plant anything until after the freezing and thawing cycle, which happens really after Memorial Day. However, we start these tomato plants by seed in April. There's a lot of work that goes into it, right? I have this little sunroom in the back. If it gets too cold, I got to bring them in. Sometimes I bring them out. I have these dozen cups where I start growing these tomato plants by seed. Now in May, once the weather breaks, me and my family go out there and we tend the garden. We have to fix up the lattice fencing. We have to rototill. We have to amend the soil. If any of you are gardeners on the webinar today, you kind of know how it goes. That takes a ton of work. Now it's Memorial Day and the whole family gets together and we go out and plant this garden that weekend or maybe the weekend after. And then the plants are in there and grown. It's game time. I'm out there every single morning watering. As it gets hotter and drier, the bugs come out or fungus starts to build, so you spray for that. And every morning I'm spending time. My mom is off on the weekends. My uncle's off on a Monday, so he'll come over, and you're weeding and you're spraying and you're watering all the way through June and July, right? And it gets hot and dry, and as the tomato plants start to grow, you put that little gate around them, right? And then you take some string and you tie them up, and now they're like 7, 8 feet tall. I'm tying them to the lattice, right? They're either growing in and outside of the lattice, and they finally start, after all this work since April, now we're in August and September, and they start really producing the fruits. They're there. They're green, they're growing. There's the grape tomatoes, the cherry tomatoes, the big tomatoes that you cut and put on your sandwiches or in your salads, right? They're all over the place. And now we start to move in September and they start to turn red and they're ready to be picked. But instead of picking those tomatoes, I just watch them grow. And I go out, sprinkle some water, spray a little bit of, some bug removal or deer repellent on everything. And I just look at them. And they're ready to rock. They're good to go. They're ready to be pulled, and they're in abundance. They're everywhere. But I just look at them and say, wow, those look great. Now the weather starts to turn. It's now probably October. And then still, instead of picking those tomatoes, they begin to rot. They get the worms and they start to fall to the ground as the weather starts to get colder. Now as we move into November, the plant turns yellow and starts to wilt, and the plant and the tomatoes are all falling to the ground, and that by Christmas time the snow has come and everything has kind of rotted and disintegrated into the soil. The question probably on your minds now, or maybe the thought in your mind now, is that sounds absolutely ridiculous. What gardener spends all that time prepping the garden, tending to the garden, growing it by seed, investing all this time and effort to grow these significant tomato plants to not harvest the fruit? That sounds ridiculous, and it is. Just like a business owner doesn't spend the countless hours week in and week out over a 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50-year time period over maybe multiple generations to never harvest the wealth that they built. So the tomato plant's the business, The tomato, it's wealth. And just like a gardener wants to harvest the tomatoes, the business owner is in business to harvest their wealth. So going back to our screen here today, in fact, it is transition strategy is very important to them, both to their future personally and the future of their company. They don't do anything about it because they don't know how. In fact, they feel afraid. Maybe besides getting married or having children, it's probably the biggest thing that they'll do in their professional and personal careers or lives. They feel trapped. They take a lot of income out of the business. They have nice houses and nice cars and take nice vacations. They say, what am I going to do without the income from my business? I feel trapped. On the flip side, they say, I don't know what's next, right? We saw that almost 94% of these business owners actually have not planned for the next transition of their life. So they are asking, what's next? They know that it's important, but it doesn't really feel urgent because they're misinformed. In fact, exit planning probably likely looks like this to them. They say, what is this? I have marketing I need to do. I have an IT I need to upgrade. I have products that need to go. I'm building a business here. My business life is frankly already complex and chaotic. I don't need all of this as well. So it's important, but I'll get to it when the time calls for it. Right now I got this urgent stuff that needs to go on. And so they look at exit planning, I believe, kind of like this, is that there's a bunch of different advisors involved along the way. There's a pathway that will follow. It's going to cost me a lot of money, and there's some kind of questionable transition at the end that I don't know what it looks like. I'm not going to do it. So our first kind of thing is we have to take them from that kind of mindset to really a mindset of value acceleration, using what we talked about at the beginning of our presentation. The value acceleration methodology, a proven practical process. But here's the formula to owner engagement. First, we're going to intrigue them, then we're going to empower them, and then we're going to nurture those that need a little bit more empowerment. So this isn't right or wrong or good or bad. This is just the way it is, and I think it has to be the way it is. I think the common behavior that we have at advisors here today is that advisors are telling owners the right answers. Now that might work for evaluation. If I know my attorney Hal, I don't really need him to spend a lot of time with me. I have a complex legal thing that needs to get done, or I have a contract that needs to be made, or I have an LOI that needs to go out. I need you to just do that. I don't need a lot of explanation. I need you to tell me the right answer. I need a valuation on my business. I don't know if it's the right answer sometimes for business owners, but you're certainly going to tell them the answer. Now, if you want to work with an owner in exit planning and transition strategy, building value in their companies and in their personal lives, you have to change from that common behavior to what I call an intriguing behavior. And so instead of telling the owners the right answers, these advisors are now going to ask the right questions and listen. Not only do you know the value of your company, but do you understand the value? What does it mean to understand the value of your company? What drives it? What kills it? How does it affect your personal financial plan? How does it affect your employees? How does it affect the third act of your life? If you had to do a transition, what would you want to see happen with your company? What's kind of your deal structure? Where do you think the company's going to go? What do you want to happen to your employees? Do you know the strength, or better yet, how would you rate the strength of your intangible capitals, your people, your systems and processes, your marketing, your customers? How would you rate your intangible capitals? So that's behavior change number one, and it's a lot different. It takes a little bit more time and a little bit more patience than I think we're used to when we're selling professional advisory services. These are some ideas that we have that we've seen work inside of the exit planning community, some strategies, if you will, to kind of intrigue. Simply, you can gift a book. I have a bunch of books sitting on my desk right now. I have Walking to Destiny, The $10 Trillion Opportunity, Buy-Sell Agreements, Finish Big by Bo Burlingham, Exit Planning, The Definitive Guide by John Brown. All of these things, Every Family's Business by Tom Deans, all of these great exit planning books that will help an owner kind of get to a intriguing kind of, oh, this makes a little bit of sense. Maybe we should talk a little bit deeper. You could do an initial assessment. If you're a certified exit planning advisor on the webinar today, you have access to many of them. You could give them an Are You Ready survey. You could take them through Set for Life. You do a different array of things that kind of give them initial assessment, right? You can have them download a white paper or an article or listen to a podcast and then talk about with them over coffee. You could take them to a chapter meeting. Some of the chapter meetings are talking about the different aspects of the transition, deal structure, buy-sell agreements, value enhancement, accounting strategies, whatever it might be, the new tax reform, right? Take them to a chapter meeting, or very simply have them attend an exit planning owner-facing event. Your next behavior that will have to change is that I believe today advisors are withholding insights until the owner becomes a client. I think this probably hits our legal crowd pretty hard. I think that, and probably rightfully so. If you're charging $300, $400, $500, $600 an hour to provide legal advice, that's your bread and butter. You're not going to actually tell me what I all the way need. You're going to give me enough to get there. I'm going to become a client, and then you're going to start charging me. Well, that's not going to work if you're trying to work with an owner in exit planning. We need to move from that kind of style of behavior, withholding insights until the advisor or until the owner becomes a client, to an empowerment style of behavior. So advisors who are sharing insights with the owner are creating an educated prospect who becomes an educated client. And I think that we can all agree that having an educated client makes a better client. So I know this takes a little bit more time, but as we talked about, education is key. It's likely that the owner doesn't know what the value is that you bring, and likely, as we talked about, is misinformed, feels trapped, frankly is a little afraid, doesn't really know what to do or how to do it. They need you. So it takes education. Here are some strategies to empower. I think the best thing that advisors can do in 2018 is peer-to-peer, owner-to-owner, face-to-face learning experiences that are facilitated by the advisor. So I think some of the ways, if you look at the State of Owner Readiness Survey, the number one person or group that they talk about when we ask them, State of Owner Readiness Survey, we ask, who are your most trusted advisors? Number one, they say they're CPA, but number two is peer groups. And if you ask me, my number one advisor are people like Brooke Norman and Josh Koza, people like my dad, Chris Snyder, people like fellow business owners that I really respect. So it's not actually a kind of your traditional advisor. It's fellow business owners and executive management are my number one advisors. My number two advisor is probably my attorney, Hal. But nonetheless, having these owners together, I'm a part of a group called Chief Executive Boards International. We meet on a kind of a quarterly basis. There's maybe a dozen of us, anywhere from $1 million in revenue up to $100 million in revenue. Pretty much all going through the same types of things, and we share those things. We share those things and develop solutions to make ourselves or our companies better. And so I think if you took value acceleration or some of the concepts and you started educating owners, facilitated by a certified exit planning advisor, and incorporating other advisors along the way to show the collaboration of the community, started to educate them on value acceleration, they'd actually start doing this. So I think peer-to-peer, face-to-face, you could do it in a smaller setting, like a focus group. I've seen CEPAs actually provide triggering event engagements to owners actually for free. So you could think about doing that, or you could think about actually involving. You could think about involving your entire team. So those are some different ways to kind of, I think, begin. Now that we've intrigued, we can begin to empower. So now we're really here to the green and the orangish boxes here. So one of the things we also found in 2017 is what we call this the middle 60. So on one side of the equation, one side of the spectrum, you have about 10% of business owners that are doing something already to plan for their exit. So that's great. On the other side of the spectrum, unfortunately, I have about 30% of owners that will never do anything at all, which leaves us with a middle 60% of business owners. And that looks basically like a split down the middle. If you began to intrigue them and then empowered them, 50% of that 60%, half of those owners would do something with you if you just simply engaged them in that way. Why? Because you're already considered one of their most trusted advisors. It's likely that they're already starting to think about it, and if you can actually make them feel comfortable enough, you'll probably trigger action by intriguing and empowering. Now, the other half of that middle 60 would do something for you if you nurtured them. So we're going to continue to empower them and continue to start to intrigue them using the different techniques and strategies that we kind of high level highlighted here in the past couple of slides. That's called the middle 60. Half of that group would do something if you simply engage them. The other half of that group would do something if you gave them further education. At the end of the day, we're actually talking about not just becoming educators, but actually becoming thought leaders. And to me, thought leaders are certainly experts, and everybody's probably an expert in a particular field or a kind of a niche field inside of their overall profession. But I don't know if we can all say that we're thought leaders. To me, thought leaders are really early pioneers. These are people that are leaders that take risks. They are very innovative and they're influencers. People like Chris Snyder, people like Peter Chrisman, people like Martha Sullivan in Wisconsin, or Julie Keys, or Julie Keys up in Minnesota, or maybe Sean Hutchinson. These kind of SEPAs that are out there kind of rolling the dice on different styles of education, different products, different techniques, who are saying, I don't know if this is actually going to work, but I want to conduct this research. I want to partner with these folks. I want to surround myself with these kind of collaborative advisors and see if it works, producing these kind of tools or solutions along the way. I'd like to use Julie actually as a quick example as we round out our webinar here today as a particular case study. There are several things that Julie has done even since this presentation was created, but she launched her chapter first, which got, frankly, the advisors bought in. From that, she started to intrigue business owners with the launch of the State of Owner Readiness Survey. She conducted that survey and then launched it at the beginning of last year in March of 2017 at an event, a one-day symposium-style event called an Owners Forum, put on by several folks that were a part of her chapter, where they released those results. After the release of those results and the showcasing of how advisors can be so collaborative, she had many, many opportunities. One, she had a media piece that was created. The Minnesota Business Magazine that went out to about 10,000 business owners allowed her and her chapter to be featured on a monthly basis in an exit planning exclusive section for the Exit Planning Institute. A couple advisors were featured each month, and they were talking about the different components or the aspects inside of the value acceleration methodology or the EPI ecosystem, so direct to owners, if you will. She also started holding collaborative and joint meetings with the Financial Planning Association, ACG, AMAA, other collaborative folks, and she took her chapter meetings from something like maybe 30, 40, or 50 people up to 150 people, kind of once a year or even once a quarter. Now, if you fast forward to her 2018, what I believe her and her group are planning are quarterly owner workshops, another one-day owner-style symposium, and I feel honored enough and privileged enough that she's asked me to be a part of her big joint meeting with ACG, AMAA, and the Financial Planning Association there, FPA. And they're expecting 150 to 160 people out at that meeting, where I'll talk about just this, triggering owner action. My point being is that whether you're trying to go direct to owners or you're trying to collaborate with advisors, thus get yourself to owners, Julie Keys and her chapter in the Twin Cities metro area is a prime example of this owner engagement formula, from intriguing to empowering to landing clients and nurturing others that need some more education. Last but not least, what this all sums up to at the end of the day, how do we trigger owner action, folks? We as advisors create a powerful message that cannot be ignored. Cannot be ignored by the business owner, cannot be ignored by academics, cannot be ignored by the media, cannot be ignored by fellow advisors. For us, it really takes us, if we want to venture into this kind of mindset, it takes a different kind of an advisor that we call the advisor of the future. If you're not thinking about it already, you should try to think about how professionally are we going to evolve ourselves so that we can adapt to the current marketplace that sits right in front of us, that starts to develop even more and more every single day. The fact of the matter is that from now until all of these baby boomers transition, which will probably leave a mark on how advisors operate in the generations to come, our owners will need more than just their wealth manager. They'll need more than just their accountant, their attorney, their investment banker. Owners will call upon us as their most trusted advisors to be more than that to them, their families, their business, and their employees. So are you going to be prepared when that opportunity knocks? Are you going to be lucky? I really invite you to challenge yourself in 2018 to transform yourself and reinvent yourself as a professional advisor, and an advisor that's more entangled into the client's life, that's more engaged with their business owner, and that can help them in partnership with a collaborative team trigger their action to change their outcomes. I invite you to look at the EPI platform to help you do that. We support several SEPAs, whether it's creating awareness, whether it's thought leadership, research, programs, whatever it is. We are your resource and partner in exit planning. So with that, folks, I really appreciate spending about an hour of your time here today. I know that there's a few comments and questions that might be coming up here. I wanted to just take a few minutes here before we kind of conclude our webinar and see if there's any questions. If you see the question box, please go ahead and submit your questions there now, and I'll answer them. A couple of conversations about people wanting to see if this is a recorded presentation. Absolutely. This is a recorded presentation, so we'll download that and distribute to everybody here in the next, give us a business day or so to kind of get that all taken care of. There's a couple of people that reached out to Josh Koza. If you don't know Josh is our client experience manager. Josh can also help you just as well as I can. So if you would like a PDF portion of this presentation or a PDF copy of this presentation, please just reach out to Josh, and I will make we'll certainly make that happen. A couple of comments. I'm looking to put together a collaboration with some people in my network to do owner empowerment sessions. Taylor, that sounds fantastic. There's several different tools, some that you probably know about, some that you may not know about, that Exit Planning Institute has debuted over the last several months. I would say that, give me a call or set up some time with me or Josh, and I want to be able to help you to do that and make that a success for you in 2018. Next question is the Exit Planning certification cross with investment banking. Is it solely in prep for an owner's exit? So yeah, the Certified Exit Planning Advisor takes you through anywhere from the early stages. So look at it as like this. Instead of looking at it as a discover, prepare, decide methodology, look at it as pre-exit, during exit, and post-exit. So our crowds that are coming to the SEPA program primarily are wealth managers or financial planners, accountants, and strategic consultants. And so we also have investment bankers, we have private equity folks, we have attorneys, we have life coaches. So it really, the exit planning, the SEPA, the Certified Exit Planning Advisor credential, really talks about the entire process from start all the way to actually exit, the execution of that exit. Next, do we have a chapter in Southern California? So the answer is absolutely yes. It is actually one of our probably most active areas of the United States. So we just launched, I believe, our 24th chapter in San Diego. So we kind of have that whole trifecta area of Southern California covered. So long time in existence has been our Southern California chapter. That chapter primarily covers Orange County. So that exists there. The chapter president is Dan Whitaker. We also have our San Diego chapter, which is run by a SEPA named Mike Rodman. And then we have our Greater Los Angeles chapter run by a SEPA named Melissa Silverman. So we have, if you're in Southern California, any one of those areas, we probably have a chapter near you. And there's also, feel free to visit all of them. I know there's a lot of crossover. Some people from San Diego come over to Orange County. Some people from Orange County go down to LA. This is a good question. How active is our home chapter here in Cleveland, Ohio? So very interesting and great question, Eric. We do have a chapter here. It's actually dormant right now. However, is in 2018 kind of go back live. It's believe it or not, it's always funny, and it's funny that I travel so much and I rarely do business here in Cleveland, Ohio, and I rarely speak here in Cleveland, Ohio. Believe that or not. But our chapter is, the active president is a gentleman named Mike Traber. He is the exit planner of the year, actually, a part of a company called Skoda Minotti here in Cleveland, Ohio. He runs their transaction advisories kind of arm of that practice. We are meeting with them and several other folks here in the Northeast Ohio community over the next month or so throughout the first quarter to kind of revamp that chapter. It was actually founded by me and Chris back in 2011 when we were operating Aspire Management. It's been through a couple of leadership transitions, and unfortunately kind of at the end of last year, at the beginning of the last year, kind of fell short. So we do have an active chapter here in Northeast Ohio. It'll be back on the circuit here in 2018. If you have interest in being a part of that chapter or having a leadership role, please reach out to me, and we'll make sure that we kind of we'll get that together for you. Question is, are there typically owners and or industries that have more, trying to read through this question here. Are there typically owners and or industries that have more, trying to read through this question here. Are there typically owners and or industries that have more, trying to read through this question here. Are there typically owners and or industries that have more, trying to read through this question here. Are there typically owners and or industries that have more that want to engage more with SEPAs in specific demographics, geographics, sectors, and or industries, and how do these business owners do or don't respond to wanting exit planning? That's actually a really good question. So the question basically sums up as, is there particular owners or industries that I think respond more to SEPAs or engage more to SEPAs and respond to exit planning? So frankly, this is a really good question. So one of the strategies that I think I might take in 2018 as an advisor is I might not necessarily lose focus of the current owner, which is likely a baby boomer, right? I think about something like 60% of the American companies here today are owned by people between the ages of about 52 and 72, so baby boomers. However, how I might get to them is going through the next generation. So a good chunk of those businesses are also family owned or and certainly employee owned or have a strong employee team. So I might go to the key managers or the family involved in that business first. So those next generations, those Gen Xers or millennials, educate them on value acceleration, and they're likely to take that knowledge to their owner and say, are you doing this type of thing? I have a friend here that's actually a friend of Drew English's too. That's a part of our clients experience team and our program coordinator. One of our friends, Joe, his family owns a manufacturing company, and we gave him the Walking to Destiny book. That book then ended up on his dad's desk after he read it at his home. And Mike Travert, the gentleman I mentioned here in Cleveland, is actually his dad's CPA and a business advisor to his father. And Mike apparently walked into Joe's dad's office and saw Walking to Destiny there and said, where'd you get that? I actually know the guy that wrote that and work with him regularly. So I think that there is some opportunity to work with the younger generation so that we can affect the older business owner. But across the board, no, I don't think that there's a particular industry or a particular owner type, a particular demographic, psychographic. I don't think that there's necessarily, one particular style of industry or makeup of owner that really respond to exit planning. I do truly believe that all owners, whether they're 20 years old or whether they're 80 years old, do think about exit strategy, but they don't really know what it is and they don't know how to do it. So I do think it's top of mind for them. I just think it's like uncharted territory. So they're looking for an advisor like you or me or any of the number of the folks that are on this webinar here today to kind of take the reins and try to empower them and kind of trigger their action and get them comfortable with this. I think one of the things that they do have all alike is that they're all afraid of transitioning, because likely this is one of their biggest passions in their life and something that they've been doing for years and years to come, or for years and years. And so, no, I don't think that there's, I think SEPAs work kind of all the way kind of across the board, different industries, different sizes. Typically, though, from a revenue range, we're looking at a $5 million company up to a $100 million company in revenue. Typically, those are the companies that are responding and working and engaging with certified exit planning advisors. That would be considered to us the lower middle market. The micro market, which I would consider companies $5 million and under, typically are interested but don't necessarily have the fees to pay these advisors out of the gate. So we kind of have to come up with other solutions for them. We've talked a lot with the Small Business Development Centers of America. We've talked to them about maybe even developing a particular credential that's for them and for those folks that advise those kind of micro market companies. They have the same issues, right? They're probably, certainly in the micro market, they're probably very income dependent on the business, right? As they're probably likely an owner operator, they're probably very, very much involved. They will have the similar issues as our lower middle market baby boomer business has as well. Last but not least, I'd probably answer that question as that I would also try to get to franchisors or dealer networks, because if you're a franchisor with 3,000 franchisees across the United States, it's likely that 60% of those franchisees are baby boomers, and it's likely that only 20% of those will actually transition. So if you're the franchisor or the dealer inside of that network and you have a bunch of network dealers, it's likely that that's going to be a real bad issue for you when you're the franchisor, if only 20% of your franchisees are actually going to be able to sell and transition their business as they begin to exit, right? So I think multiple ways we can get to the business owner, but there's not one particular style of owner or style of industry that really say I work with those. I would say revenue range is the only thing I could pinpoint, and that's 5 million to 100 million in revenue. All right, guys. Well, with that, we're kind of running over on time. What I will is download the questions that are sitting in here and share them with everybody. But I really appreciate everybody's time. I really look forward to working with many of you throughout 2018, and I think hopefully today you've learned different strategies and different motivations that can inspire you to really change your owner's outcome. Remember that we're here to help all of you do that. If you need anything at all, please let me and my team know here at the Exit Planning Institute. Look forward to seeing you in 2018. Thanks.